Welcome to the new world. My name is Jackson Stone. I am 19 years old, and this is the story of events that led to the near death of the human race. 13 years ago, our government went to war with many others of the world. But what they didn't tell us was that they had a secret biological weapon developed and perfected over many years. This virus, as they were calling it, was responsible for infecting, and over time, turning people and animals into horrific monstrosities of their former selves. The government, our government in the United States, was responsible for the following outcome of the war. The war started in the year 2022, when the United States invaded multiple countries. Our government thought it was the best possible course of action, to invade all our enemies at once. They dictated their soldiers to invade North Korea, China, and many other countries at once in a surprise attack on those who were considered enemies. While the infantry was keeping enemy troops in check and occupied, the government sanctioned a private science sector, known as ADB, otherwise known as the American Department of Bioweapons. This department was sanctioned for the sole purpose of using a deadly virus to make a bioweapon. This virus was known as hyproxis. No one knew about this virus until the invasions, as this virus is not of human creation. No, this virus came from space. There was an asteroid crash in the northern hemisphere in the early 2000s. This virus has been known to turn anything into a monstrosity of their former self. It affected animals and humans alike, regardless of genes or breed. The scientists behind this program, working for the A.D.B, were responsible for weaponizing hyproxis. They replicated it in laboratories, using small amounts from the chunk of asteroid it came from. The scientists would then dilute hyproxis and put it into droppable gas bombs. While the US troops were holding off enemy soldiers, the gas bombs would be silently dropped in areas to infect enemy soldiers. Hyproxis, which would enrage and infect anyone who came into contact with it, was quite deadly as it would turn people on one another. While the former people, now in their monstrous forms, were attacking the non-infected in the buildings and trenches, the US soldiers were able to push and eliminate the enemy. Although this seemed effective, it quickly got out of hand. The United States government sanctioned 85 bunkers, which took roughly 9 months to build. Each bunker was a different size. The first bunkers were the ones for important people. Politicians, senators, congressmen and women, and of course the president. The capacity for each bunker is roughly 15,000 people. Each came with its own nuclear reactor for power, a hydroponics for food, a schooling area for the children to be had in the bunker, a cafeteria for eating, a commons for relaxation and mingling between residents, and of course an armory for the bunker guards. Hyproxis was out of control. It infected multiple countries very quickly, as the virus was airborne and could spread quickly. The problem was, we expected it to dissipate. It never did, and eventually US citizens were quick to contract the disease. This led the government leading everyone into bunkers and shutting the doors for the foreseeable future. This was a full extinction event. The year is now 2035, 13 years after the first hyproxis infection. I've always lived a quiet life in the bunkers. My family entered Bunker 81 in the year 2023, 1 year after the first weaponized versions of hyproxis were deployed. My mother and sister died on the journey to the bunker. We were all driving as fast as we were allowed in order to safely get a spot in the bunker. During the trip we came to a guarded checkpoint, a crossing. A bridge, which was suspended over the Hudson River. With as many people that were trying to get to the bunker, the weight was too much for the bridge to support. As traffic was jammed, my family and I decided to make a run for it, leaving the majority of our belongings behind. People were screaming, guards were shouting orders, and gunshots starting to ring out. I think the added weight from all the vehicles as well as the makeshift checkpoint that had been built here was too much for the bridge to support, and this was made evident by the groaning of the cables as the weight became too much to support. The bridge collapsed under my sister and mother, as they were behind me and my father. I turned around to the familiar scream of my mother and watched as they were lost to the river below. My father and I journeyed over the next day to the bunker, and were accepted inside. In the current day, all male residents of the bunker, that are aged 18 to 20 are required to do one mandatory scouting run to the outside world. Today is my day.
Hey, kid, how you holding up?
Asked Officer Perna. I'm doing alright, sir. I'm actually quite excited to see the real world and how much has changed in the 13 years I've been in the bunker. I replied.
Well, get ready, Jackson, here comes our head officer of the expedition.
Perna said, with a sly smile playing on his face. The current head officer for our scouting run would be Officer Mac. Mac was well known as one of the most highly liked officers in the bunker, as he was always going out of his way to help others and improve everyone's lives on a daily basis. His wife, Sarah, worked in hydroponics producing food for the bunker.
Well, Perna, what do we have here? These are our 2 cadets for the day.
Mac stated with a somewhat superiority tone.
Yes, sir, these are the cadets whom we will be taking with us for our run today.
Perna said while pointing at me, and the other cadet whose name I was unaware of.
Let's get moving, then.
Mac said without giving time for any further questions. Everyone was geared with a survival pack, with enough rations for 3 days. Everyone had a flare, to signal for others in case we got split up, as well as a standard M9 Beretta handgun, with 3 clips of ammunition. Once we had all packed our gear into our pack, we started for the entrance of the vault.
We're taking these cadets out for their mandatory scouting run today, Jeff, so open up.
Mac said to the sleepy guard operating the bunker's air-pressured sealable titanium door. As the door opened, it emitted a high squeaking noise, as well as a hissing from the air pressure. As I took my first steps out into the new world, I was in awe by what scene was unfolding as the door opened before my eyes. The sky was a dark gray cast, contrary to the blue I remembered from being a small child. The earth around the bunker's entrance was a dark brown cast tone, and it was apparent the nuclear warheads that were detonated after civilians had entered the bunker to stem the flow of hyproxis were still taking their toll on the land years later.
Still as beautiful as ever, Mac?
Perna said with a laugh.
Yeah, just makes me wish we could change everything back to the way things were before.
Mac stated coldly while staring at the mountain in the distance. We all grouped up and started walking together, heading due east. It was Officer Mac leading, with me and the cadet whose name I still did not know in the middle, while Officer Perna brought up the rear. We walked in silence for around an hour, before I spotted my first real buildings in the new world. It was a small tan shack, only around 10 feet long by 8 feet wide.
Remember this place, boys. This is a shelter we built a few years ago to help scouts who couldn't make it back to the bunker by nightfall, or who were injured and needed rest before heading back. And believe me, you do not want to be out here during the night.
Mac said with a highly matter-of-fact term. We continued on, only giving small glances at the shack before moving on. Mac told us to keep quiet and not speak unless it was urgent, so we did just that. Our group continued walking for roughly another hour, and I could see through the overcast sky that the sun was going to set soon. The time on my watch said it was 4:52 p.m., so it was going to be dark in roughly 1.5 hours, since the sun has been said to set by scouts around this time of year and 6:30 p.m.
About how much further do you plan to take these kids, Mac?
Perna said from the back of the group.
Well, I planned on taking them to the burn.
Mac said while keeping his momentum and moving. What's the burn? I asked while taking a few seconds to catch my breath.
The burn is a huge open crater left by some old buildings that had collapsed and exploded. The place constantly has fires, and usually is ridden with infected during the nighttime.
Perna said with a bitter tone. We kept moving at a decent pace until our group was standing over the ledge of an enormous crater. The crater was probably 300 feet in length, and well over 1,000 feet wide. There was collapsed rubble and concrete everywhere from the buildings Perna had mentioned, but no sign of any infected creatures or people.
Alright kids, this is as far as we go. It's almost nighttime and we're gonna be lucky if we make it back to the small scout shelter before sundown. Let's get a move on.
Mac said while turning around. I saw out of the corner of my eye, a small shadow moving throughout a set of rubble. Before I could ask anyone what it could be, I heard an ear-piercing scream from the other cadet. I turned around instantly to see the cadet on the ground with some sort of thing hovering over his body. It looked like a dog, or a wolf, but its skin was heavily tearing at the seams from what looked to be bulging muscles beneath. It had a slight translucent red tone to its skin, and its eyes were a glowing shade of yellow. The creature instantly turned his attention from us to the cadet trapped on the ground under its weight, and tore into his esophagus, letting a small spray of red misty blood into the air. The cadet's screaming was cut short by the creature's action, and we all turned around and immediately started running. I ran purely off of adrenaline and fear back onto the path leading back to the small scout shack, and did not stop until I got there. When I arrived, I noticed Perna was right behind me and was already readily opening the door and grabbing supplies to take inside out of his supply pack.
Alright Jack, I lost Mac along the path, but I'm sure he's going to turn up soon enough.
Perna stated while still unloading supplies. What was that? What just murdered the other cadet? I said, with a slight shake in my voice from the adrenaline and the fear.
Well, Mac was stupid for taking you guys clear to the burn, since he knows infected things roam that area sometimes. But that is what the scouts have nicknamed wargs. Nasty things really, infected versions of common house dogs or wild wolves. Very big, very mean, very aggressive. Not so dangerous alone, but in a pack, they can be a pain to deal with.
Perna said. You took us there knowing things like that were in the area? I said with a slightly angry tone.
Listen, kid, calm down. We didn't know they were going to be there. Usually, they don't come out until nightfall, so for a lone one to attack us, even in a group, during daylight means food is getting scarce. They're desperate.
Perna said. As soon as he finished his sentence, we heard a pounding on the door to the shack. I fumbled to grab my M9 Beretta out of my holster and take the safety off as I looked to Perna for instructions. He slowly motioned to check the peephole in the door, and as soon as I did, I instantly threw the door open. Standing in front of us was a slightly bloody and sweaty Mac, who looked worse for wear.
Jesus Mac, what the hell happened to you? Perna said while staring at Mac's arm, which he was pressuring with his other hand.
Same warg that got Peter got a hold of my arm down the path. I got a bullet through its head, but not before it took a chunk out of my arm.
Mac explained while sitting down to bandage his wound.
Alright Mac, it's too dangerous to work towards the bunker tonight. Let's wait until morning before we head back to the doors.
Perna said while closing the door and grabbing Mac first aid. I did not realize until I sat down how tired I was, mainly due to the adrenaline keeping me active. As I slowly nodded off to the sound of Perna giving Mac first aid and them talking about the route to take to the bunker tomorrow morning, I fell into a deep sleep. I woke to the sound of Perna packing supplies into our bags, and I could see light filtering through the shades of the single window placed in the shack. As I stood up and gathered my pack from Perna, who was still packing items, I noticed Mac was a paler shade than yesterday. Is Mac going to be okay? I asked Perna.
Well, we've never experienced a warg bite before, since normally we don't scout at night, but I'm sure the doctors back in the bunker can treat him and get him back into fighting shape in no time.
Perna said with a smile on his face. I nodded slowly while continuing to pack my stuff, and noticed Mac was awake. He grabbed his canteen and guzzled down some water, with a groggy look on his face. He nodded towards me.
You sleep alright, kid?
Mac said with a raspy tone to his voice. Yes sir, even with everything that happened yesterday I was too tired to stay up any longer after my adrenaline faded. I replied.
Well, good. Let's get a move on to our bunker.
Mac said without giving time for further conversation. We all finished packing our gear and headed outside into the daylight. There were small animal tracks outside in the slightly wet dirt, but nothing as big as the can we came across yesterday. We traced our steps back along the path to the bunker, and arrived within a few hours at the huge titanium doors to the bunker. Mac was too sick it seemed to be of any help getting in, while Perna got the guards to allow us back in the bunker. For the first time in a long time, I was afraid.